Will Honda have a say in a seat at Aston Martin for the 2026 season? Now, that is a question that has been on the lips of many fans since the deal was announced for Honda to become the engine partner of Aston Martin. Now, obviously, when we look at Honda in previous years gone by in their time with Red Bull Racing, we know for a fact that they've helped Yuki Tsunoda get into a seat. They've had drivers in the Young Driver program at Red Bull to help develop them across the course of recent years. And obviously, their partnership with Red Bull is coming to a close to join Aston Martin, but that partnership has meant that Yuki Tsunoda has got an opportunity in the main team at Red Bull before the end of their partnership. Now, obviously, heading into Aston Martin will be a very, very different kettle of fish. Aston Martin at the moment aren't one of the leading teams on the grid. They're a midfield team, and obviously they need a lot of developing heading into 2026, and they'll obviously have a brand new Honda engine to contend with at the start of that season as well, in comparison to the current Mercedes power unit that they've been using. Now, obviously, at the moment, if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell to stay tuned for all of my latest Formula One content, news, previews and reviews heading your way across the course of this 2025 season. We're pushing really hard for 450 subscribers on the channel, so hit that red button down below and help us on our way. Aston Martin have the driver lineup of Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso, I believe, has a contract until the end of 2026. Lance Stroll, he just seems to be on this rolling contract where every year it's a discussion: are you staying, are you going? And every year he continues to stay at the team. Now, obviously, the most notable thing coming out of this is that Honda have said that they will have a say and they will be able to voice their opinion in deciding the drivers for 2026 and beyond, as long as they're a partnership, which I think is very, very interesting. We know that Honda have a really good relationship with Max Verstappen, and they've obviously been a major part of why Max Verstappen is now a four-time world champion and currently sitting just 1 point behind Lando Norris in that drivers' championship as we look at the standings right now. And is that a situation that can be exploited heading into 2026 and beyond? Because we know that Max Verstappen is beginning to feel a bit of unrest at Red Bull Racing in the way that they're handling car development and the way that they're handling his teammates and things like that, which ultimately I'm not particularly surprised at. I don't think Red Bull have handled things very well across the course of the vast majority of the last 5-6 years, but ultimately it's one of those things that's always been in Max Verstappen's favour. And now the problem is that they're not going to win the Constructors, and they're in a position where they have a car where they could win the Constructors. I know a lot of people will turn around and say, oh, the car's fourth fastest, the car's fifth fastest, whatever, but ultimately that car, in my opinion, is second fastest across the course of the last 3 or 4, we're on round 3, last 3 races this season, which is obviously really good for Max. He's had a brilliant start to this season, picking up a win, a podium and a 4th place finish, and that's why he finds himself second in the championship. Now, obviously, along with Honda, you've also now got Adrian Newey, that I believe has shares now in the Aston Martin team, who will obviously have input as well. And if they can get together and put together a deal to bring Max Verstappen to Aston Martin, is that even a circumstance that Max Verstappen's even going to want? And which driver will they get rid of? I think many people are anticipating that Fernando Alonso will retire at the end of 2026, and obviously I think he's 43 as I'm recording this video, so by then he's going to be pushing 45, and obviously if he's still got the pace, you're not going to turn around and push Fernando out the team. But ultimately, if you've got the opportunity to go out and get a Verstappen for a car that could potentially be pushing the front of the field as of 2026, it's going to be very, very interesting to see if that's a deal that would even encourage Max Verstappen, if that makes sense, because you've obviously got the new Red Bull powertrains power unit, which is going to be coming in for 2026 for AlphaTauri and Red Bull. At the moment, I think they're expecting to be 7 horsepower down, which is pretty similar to that of the Alpine power unit, which ultimately is terrible. So it's going to be interesting to see, obviously, how it develops over the course of the next few weeks and months, because Max Verstappen is obviously a brilliant driver, and I know a lot of people like to think that I have a downer on Max Verstappen. I do on some occasions, I'm not going to lie, but ultimately I will never deny how good of a driver he is. I do think that going to another team where it's not built around him, not focused on him from the off, and seeing how he can develop in that situation, maybe a team a bit like Lewis Hamilton did, 5th fastest, which Aston Martin would be, and develop them into the next world champions and things like that. And that's going to be interesting to see if that's something that Max would even be interested in, or if he'd prefer to just move away from Red Bull. Now, obviously, if we go back to a couple of days before this GP that's just passed, there was comments made about Max Verstappen purely having focus on Red Bull and making sure his GT3 team is doing the best that it can do. Now, that is amazing. That is brilliant. But we all know how quickly things can change in Formula One. Just this time last year, we was talking about Lewis Hamilton getting a 5-year contract extension and ambassadorial duties at Mercedes, and not this time last year, a little bit longer, let's say 18 months ago, we were talking about Lewis Hamilton's getting a 5-year contract extension, ambassadorial duties, staying at Mercedes until he retires, etc. And ultimately, when it got to the end of that season, when he was given that poor 1+1 contract, that all went out the window, and Lewis Hamilton had to make a move for his career, essentially, because otherwise we'd be heading into this season 2025 with Lewis Hamilton on a 1-year contract, and Kimi Antonelli would be where? Would he be in Formula 2 still? Would he be at Williams? What would have happened? And that is the interesting topic of discussion that's going to sort of come up when you sort of look at decisions that can be made by Max Verstappen, because it's a similar scenario. Max Verstappen isn't necessarily being given the treatment that he maybe wants for his teammates in the car and things like that in this 2025 season at the moment. And unless that changes, would that open the door for a potential move by, say, Adrian Newey to turn up to Max Verstappen and go, you know what, we're building something special here, why don't you come and give us a go? A bit like, in a similar sense, Niki Lauda did with Lewis Hamilton at the end of his time at McLaren. And there's so many similarities between Hamilton and Verstappen in this potential move, in the fact of Aston Martin are probably the 5th or 6th fastest team like Mercedes were. We're going into a regulation change where they're getting an engine which has been really good for the past few years, like the Honda engine has for Red Bull. You've got that relationship behind the scenes with Verstappen and Newey, and obviously like you did with Hamilton and Lauda. And that's obviously the big conversation is there enough for Aston Martin to encourage Max Verstappen to potentially make that leap of faith? Because, in my opinion, if Verstappen goes to Aston Martin, wins a couple of championships, whatever, he'll be on 6, maybe even 7, depending what happens at the end of this season, and he can walk away. Now, obviously, Verstappen claims he's not here for the trophies, the accolades, or any of that jazz, but ultimately, if he wasn't, he'd have left after his first one, and that's my personal opinion. Now, Verstappen has had a brilliant career. Is Honda having a say going to give him that opportunity to get in at Aston Martin if that's what he wants to do? Probably it's not going to be the ultimate decision, but I do think that when Fernando Alonso chooses to hang up the steering wheel and put those gloves away, the racing boots, I do think that Verstappen will be one of the first calls made by the Aston Martin team, and I do think that there'll be a massive, massive money offer on the table. Will it be equal to that of the one that Ferrari have given Lewis Hamilton? I'm not entirely sure as of right now, but it's certainly a discussion that can be had over the course of the next few weeks. Now, if you haven't done so already, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button as well. I'll catch you tomorrow for my pre-race preview of the Bahrain GP. We've already got some talk of some upgrades coming away for Ferrari. Are there any other teams bringing upgrades? Let me know down in the comments. If you haven't done so already, I'll catch you in my next one.